we're going after the dull, the dirty, and the dangerous, right? If it's dull, dirty, or dangerous, people either shouldn't be doing it or they don't want to be doing it. And that's really where our technology comes into play. Robotaxis are great, but there's other modes of transportation that people can take. I think there's no other solution in the commercial market to the scaling and growth needs of the industry. And trucking is the backbone of a modern economy, not just the US economy, but all economies around the world. And so we play a critical role in, I think, the future growth of the economy. And that's why I'm so excited about the commercial market.
Don Burnette is the founder and CEO of Kodiak AI and a longtime autonomous vehicle industry pioneer. Before founding Kodiak in 2018, he held technical leadership roles at Uber and Google's self-driving car project, the predecessor to Waymo, and co-founded self-driving truck startup Otto, which Uber acquired in 2016. Don holds degrees in physics, mathematics, electrical engineering, and robotics from the University of Florida and Carnegie Mellon University. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Great to be here.
Well, I have to say, for those watching on video, even though you look young, you're an OG in the AV industry. What's one thing that's kept you going this whole time for, 15, 16 years?
Well, that's a great question. I've just always been passionate about the technology and its ability to save lives.
Hmm.
I've told the story before I got into this space. I was involved in a pretty serious high speed accident in my car where luckily everyone walked away, and it was very, very fortunate. But I realized in that moment that it could have
Yeah.
gone completely the other way. And so that memory continues, in my head all the time.
Hmm.
I think about the fact that we really have an opportunity to deploy this technology safely and broadly, so to save lives. And
Yeah.
that ultimately is what drives me and keeps me going after all this time.
Yeah. And I mean, you've been at several different companies, sort of seems like you've gravitated towards trucking. But was there a point or a catalyst where you knew the technology would work? Or, maybe even now, what's your sort of confidence level in the technology and, achieving that goal of saving lives?
I've always been an optimist, right? I've
Hmm.
always believed that the technology was going to work. The question was merely how long is it going to take us?
Got it.
And part of the challenge there is that there's so many unknowns. When you're doing
Hmm.
something for the first time in a new field and effectively new science, you think you know what it's going to take, but you really don't have a perspective there. And unlike a lot of the AI app or services community, the physical AI component, the physical in the physical AI, turns
Yeah.
out to be quite a difficult challenge. And so it's never been doubt. I've never had doubt that we were going to
Yeah.
succeed, but it's more of what does it actually take? How many I's do you need to dot? How many T's do you need to cross? Develop the software, develop the AI, put that together with reliable hardware, show all of the functional safety analysis on that hardware, and then ultimately prove safety through repetition, simulation, and testing in order to ultimately get it deployed and then build a product around it,
Yeah.
right? Build a product that people can effectively and efficiently use and want to use. And so there's just so many hurdles to getting to scale in a new field like self-driving that it takes a long, long time. But I think I've obviously always been a believer that we could do it. Did I think it was going to take more than 18 years to get to this point? Probably not.
Yeah.
But hey, sometimes things take a while. But I
Yeah.
think we finally hit our stride and we're in a good place now.
Yeah, it sort of feels like that first, I'll sort of gloss over it, the first 15 to 20 years of AV that you've been around for, and I haven't. But it sort of seems like it was like more the technical phase, like figuring out the technology. Does it work? Can we get it to work? Is it safe? And now it seems like we're kind of right shifting into commercialization, like a lot, there are services operating driverless, paid driverless around the globe. And now it's more about scale, business model, commercialization, partnerships, and all of that, which kind of seems like a completely different skill set. You seem to have more of an engineering background. What do you think about that kind of different skill set, or am I off base?
No, I think that's a fair point. I mean, this is we most of us started as researchers,
Hmm.
right? Coming out of academia, focusing on the technology as technologists. I certainly have that background. It's been a long learning journey for me from my kind of days as a software engineer, just writing code at my computer, to becoming a leader and someone who has to run a company, which is much more than just technology, right? There's many
Hmm.
aspects to running a company and raising capital and dealing with the whole investor side. And now, exactly as you said it, we're now entering that commercialization phase. And so I think the most important thing that you can do is surround yourself with great people who understand how to build great products, who have done it before,
Yeah.
who have the relationships with customers, who can build relationships with customers while simultaneously telling the story and really inspiring the market. Because that's such an important piece of this, is that you can have great technology, but if
Hmm.
the end user doesn't quite understand how great it is and how great it's going to be for them and how much it's going to change their business and their lives,
Yeah.
you'll never sell it. So absolutely, there's a transition happening. I find it to be incredibly exciting because it's been so long. It's kind of like,
Hmm.
okay, we've done that R&D phase and we've done it for a long time. Now it's time for something new. So it's time to move on, and we're right at that inflection point, as you said. And I think that's incredibly exciting, not only for us but for the broader industry.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the industry, consumers, there's a lot of benefits to be had. So definitely, I think your optimistic phase is going to be paying off greatly over the next few years. So, how would you describe Kodiak, the company? Let's say you're at someone's kid's birthday party and they've never heard of Kodiak before. What's your quick pitch? What do you do, and why should we care?
Well, we're a physical AI company. So at the end of the day, we're writing software algorithms that ultimately interact with the real world, in our case, through transportation. And
Hmm.
more specifically, within transportation, we happen to do commercial transportation. Although the technology is not really specific to that endeavor, it's more of that's the business model and that's the customer base that we've been pursuing and we
Yeah.
think is the most lucrative and impactful for the company. But we effectively write software algorithms that drive vehicles. And we've been able to generalize that system across a broad range of vehicle sets. That was really important to us when we started. Yes, we want to
Mm.
work in trucking, but we don't want to be confined to one specific make or model or even design of vehicle. And so we've put our technology on treaded tanks. We've put our
Yeah.
technology on uh, surface street passenger vehicles like the F-150. We've put our technology on medium duty and heavy duty trucks. And
Hmm.
so that's been really important to us as we as we develop the company.
Got it. So, would you say that, I mean, you mentioned the system is generalizable. That's a good word. Does it kind of work best in these larger form factors, or is that just kind of, could you stick this on a sedan and you think it would work almost as well? Or is that kind of, what you're gravitating for more for commercial and business reasons?
I think it would work just as well on a sedan as it does on the big rig. I don't think there's anything specific to the form factor. We've built the system to be incredibly modular. We've
Yeah.
shown that
Interesting.
it can work. For instance, we have pickup trucks with our technology that work just as well as our long haul semi trucks, Class 8 trucks. And so we've we've generalized not only the vehicle itself, but also the environment by which it
Yeah.
operates in, right? So we do both what I call structured autonomy and unstructured autonomy. Structured is everything man-made. So roadways, lane stripes, curbs, buildings, urban
Hmm.
centers, highways, those sorts of things. And then, of course, we also do unstructured, which is a dirt road or off-road or rural locations. But even through the forest, we've taken our technology into the rainforest. We've driven
Wow.
it across rivers. We've driven it through the field and through, really complex environments. And the great thing is, it's all one AI system.
Hmm.
So we don't have a specialized product that does off-road versus on-road. It's all one system. It's trained from one corpus of data. And we think that that ultimately makes the system significantly more durable,
Yeah.
reliable, and stronger as a product in the market.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I guess it makes sense, right? Like a human may not be the best driver in all of those different scenarios, but I've driven on the streets. I could probably drive through a rainforest. I might not be an expert at it, but
You absolutely
I'm gonna
could,
try not
right?
to
And
hit
that's kind of the
anything,
point,
right?
right? I could put you almost anywhere and ask you to drive a vehicle. And in fact, you may not even have a commercial driver license, but if I put you behind the steering wheel of a big rig, you
Hmm.
could probably get it down the road,
Yeah.
right? You might not be the best at it.
Hmm.
You might need a little practice, but
Yeah.
we think that the driving problem in general should be generalizable across
Got it.
all environments. And ultimately, we want something that, we consider that's called level 5, which is these systems can just drive anywhere and do anything. That's our ultimate vision for the company.
Yeah, definitely. Very cool. So I believe there's a few different categories, industries that you guys are focusing on: long haul trucking, industrial, and defense. Can you talk a little bit more about each of those?
Sure. Maybe I'll start with defense.
Yeah.
Defense is exactly as it sounds. We think that there's a great opportunity to introduce automation and automated systems, particularly for ground vehicles, into
Hmm.
the US military, allied militaries. There's a lot of interest there from the government side, from the DoD, and they've been funding various programs to spearhead the
Yeah.
R&D work of integrating these algorithms into the types of vehicle platforms that they're interested in. And we've worked with some great partners, such as General Dynamics Land Systems, Textron Systems in the past, to integrate our technology onto those platforms and provide them for DoD use. I would say that's still in the early stages of
Hmm.
development, not quite at the production level yet, but we're getting there, and we think this is going to be a big opportunity.
What would be a
And
good
then
example of something that's live, or kind of like a specific problem that you're solving in the defense space with your AI?
it's really it's really the interaction with the customer. It's the usability of the system, because when soldiers get their hands on an autonomous vehicle, they
Hmm.
instantly want to do everything with it. They're like, okay, cool. I want to send it into combat, and I want it to do
Hmm.
this maneuver, and I want it to choreograph this con op.
Hmm.
And most of the autonomy systems developed today are somewhat clunky. They need a fairly well-defined objective. They're very capable and they're very safe, but they're not as nimble as someone may expect who has
Yeah.
never interacted with autonomy in the past. And so part of the challenge is technology, as always. But then I talk about the three pillars of autonomy often, which I consider to be the technology pillar, a safety pillar, and the product pillar. And in the defense world, the product pillar is definitely where most of the work and most of the focus and most of the uncertainty is, because it's
Interesting.
about what does the product do, who uses it, and how do they use it? How do you train them to use it?
Hmm.
And then how do you get feedback from them to adapt to their needs in real time? So there's a lot of challenges there.
Very cool. And you've also got a lot of progress that you're making in industrial and long haul trucking. I'll let you pick which one you want to tackle next.
Sure. I think let's talk about industrial trucking.
Hmm.
So we recognized pretty early on that while most people are familiar with highway environments for trucking,
Right.
right? You can go on any interstate highway in the country and see a whole bunch of trucks lined up in the right-hand lane. There's this entire underserved, underappreciated industry of off-road trucking. And
Hmm.
goods have to be moved from often mining sites. We also work in the logging industry and the oil and gas industry. These types of industries, they need to move products.
Yeah.
And ultimately, there's two ways to move products. You can put it on a train or you can put it on a truck. And often you put it on a truck for various reasons. And those truck drivers are often faced with some of the most dangerous and grueling circumstances
Yeah.
anywhere on the planet for driving a truck. And so it's a really great opportunity to introduce automation for the safety, for the reliability, and for the resiliency, just the availability of autonomous systems to do these jobs. And so we got connected with Atlas Energy Solutions, who ended up being our launch customer. And as you said, we've now deployed 35 of these trucks into their fleet.
Yeah.
They're a frac sand company. They move frac sand from a sand mine to oil and gas wells in a place called the Permian Basin in West Texas. And these can be 10 miles, 20 miles, 40 miles, or longer on the
Hmm.
routes. But they're really, really rugged environment with really bumpy, pothole filled roads with no structure, right? This is an unstructured world.
Yeah.
So there's really no guidance other than don't venture into the brush,
Right.
right? To the
Take it
right.
slow, take it
But it's
easy.
still a lane, it's still a road network. So what a
Hmm.
lot of people don't understand is that it's an environment that has intersections and roadways
Hmm.
and rules of the road. There's no priority for autonomous vehicles. We have to interact with all the traffic. The shift changes, so it creates a lot of traffic when people are going into
Hmm.
and out of the region, all the workers that are based out in these
Yeah.
operational areas. So it's quite can be quite crowded and
Hmm.
quite close quarters. Often there's a lot of oncoming vehicles in those environments. So it presents a lot of challenges. But at the same time, we think this is a very valuable space, and it's
Yeah.
one where we uniquely went into very early on and are now serving customers with a fully driverless vehicle that
Yeah.
runs 24/7, day and night,
Wow.
rain or shine. And it's been very successful, and we're continuing to develop and deliver those into the future.
Yeah. So this industrial use case seems like a strong one, I guess, from point of view, the first point of view, I'm guessing mining, logging, these probably aren't in convenient city centers, right? They're probably way out in the middle of nowhere, where these natural resources tend to be. And then I guess from a regulatory perspective, these are also all on private roads, private property. So you can kind of deploy, I'm guessing, a little easier than if you were on a public highway or a public street.
They do tend to be remote
Mm-hmm.
locations, as you said. Sometimes that is private property,
Hmm.
but in the case of the Permian, there's both private and public roads.
Oh, cool.
Now, one of the aspects of our product is that we try to provide it as a service to our
Hmm.
customers, meaning we want the customer to ultimately own and operate the asset.
Yeah.
We want to be an asset like company, and we also recognize that we're not a logistics or trucking company, right? That's
Yeah.
not our expertise. Our expertise is AI software. So we want to provide the AI software, and we want to let the trucking companies do their trucking company thing. And I think that's the best model. Now, in that vein, they ultimately get full discretion on where they use these vehicles. So a lot of people have talked about private roads. It turns out that in the Permian in particular, private roads often don't have weight limitations the way that public roads do. So
Hmm.
typically, a public road will have an 80,000 pound limit. And that's true of like the big rigs that you see on
Yeah.
the highway, where you can put one trailer's worth of goods in the trailer. But on private roads, you can often carry much more. So it's much more efficient for you if
Hmm.
you can do all of your operations on private roads. And what Atlas has done is they built this conveyor belt called the Dune Express. It's, I think,
Hmm.
the second largest conveyor belt in the world. It's 42 miles, I believe.
Wow.
And they move sand from the mine over a lot of the public road infrastructure out
Hmm.
into the region where the sand is needed most. And then from there, they fill single, double, and even triple trailers up to 275,000
Wow.
pounds. And Kodiak now carries doubles and triples for them on a daily
Hmm.
basis and then delivers those to the well site. So that's typically where you get
Yeah.
the kind of private public distinction. As you said, though, from a regulatory perspective, certainly that helps. That being said, in Texas and many other states, particularly along the southern corridor of the United States, which is where we operate, we already have the freedom and permission to operate both on private and public roads. And so that doesn't really
Got it.
come into the equation as much as you might expect. We
Yeah.
have the permission to operate on both sets.
So I have to say, I mean, I think I read you guys were at 5 trucks 1 year ago, and now you're up to 35 trucks. No one in the cab. I think that's always important to distinguish, right? Because you see a lot of press releases, and if it doesn't explicitly say
That's
no
right.
one in
Right.
the cab, no one in the behind the seat, right? There's always qualifiers. It can get a little dicey, but I think there's also like I almost feel like it undersells what you're doing, right? If it's 35 trucks, 24/7, 250,000 pounds of dirt, like that's a lot more impressive than 35 robotaxis cruising around, maybe giving a ride here and there to a passenger.
Well, I appreciate that. I think robotaxis are awesome too.
Yeah.
Honestly, all autonomy is cool. What I love about robotaxis, and Waymo is definitely the spearheading this industry, is that people can see and touch them.
Yeah.
Right? This is an industry where seeing is believing, and often for us being a trucking company, it's behind the scenes, right? It's
Hmm.
out of
Yeah.
it's out of sight, out of mind. But for robotaxis, it's front and center, and people can go and experience the technology firsthand. And I hear stories almost every single day when I talk to folks externally about how they got into their first Waymo.
Yeah.
For the first 5 minutes, it was super cool, and then it was really boring. And it's like, wow, what an amazing experience! And now I use Waymos all the time. I think that's great for the industry as a whole because it spreads awareness. And ultimately, we want more people exposed to the technology because once you get exposed to it, you realize this is the future of
Yeah.
transportation. Now, again, I think from a utility perspective and from a TAM perspective, the commercial trucking space is a better model and business to pursue, which is why I've been focused on trucking for well over a decade at this point. But
Got it.
all forms of transportation ultimately need to be automated, and I think they're all important.
Yeah. So you've got the industrial use case, and you've also got this long haul trucking use case. Would love to hear what Kodiak is doing in that. And maybe you can even tell me which one you think has the larger TAM if you had to pick. It might be like picking between one of your kids, but if you had to pick.
Hands down, long haul trucking is
Okay.
much larger than industrial, right?
All right.
So,
Easy one.
keeping your eye on the prize. This is what we founded the company to do, and this is what we've been pursuing for the last 8.5 years. We think other industries are important to serve as well. We want to spread the technology broadly
Right.
across multiple industries to the extent that we can, and find customers who can improve their business ROI by implementing our technology, either through reduced costs or improved safety or improved efficiency, or all of the above. But no question, highway environments is the ultimate goal for any commercial autonomy company. And we are on a path to get there. We've been operating with some great customers across the southern United States for well over 7 years now. And
Yeah.
we run freight for those customers such as Werner and JB Hunt, and we announced rail transport earlier this year. We run for them on a daily basis, but we have a safety observer in the cab still, right? So there's
Hmm.
the qualification. We are focused as a company, 100% focused as a company on removing the driver by the end of this year. So that's the big goal that we've set for ourselves. That's the one we've kind of talked publicly about since before we went
Yeah.
public, last summer in 2025. We put a line in the sand and said we want to get there by this time.
Hmm.
And right now, I'm happy to say that we're on track to get there. So
Got it. What does it take to get there? Are there concrete product or regulatory steps or safety milestones that you need to hit?
it's primarily on the safety side at this point. So
Hmm.
regulatory, we think we're good. But on the safety side, we have a rigorous process that we call proving our safety case. And this consists of showing statistically proving that across all the different given scenarios that the system is inherently safe.
Hmm.
So anything that could possibly happen, we have to be able to show through documentation that we believe our system handles it at least to the level that you would expect a human to handle the scenario. That's kind of the bar that we've set for ourselves, and most of the industry sets as the kind of launch criteria
Hmm.
is, are you better than a human driver? And if you can show that you're better across all the different severity cases of potential incidents that it can occur, and you can handle incidents at a level that is as good as a human driver, then you can launch. Now,
Hmm.
how do you do that? It's very complicated. It's very time consuming. There's a lot of mechanical work. This is an area where AI doesn't really help you as much, right? Because a lot of it is track testing. A lot of it is gathering real world miles through running your trucks and gathering data. There's a large simulation component, but even there, AI can only take you so far. There's a lot of quality control and quality assurance and steps that you need to take with your team. There's the whole functional safety side, which means all the hardware we need to
Hmm.
prove is functionally safe, and there's standards that you follow to show all of those things. So there's just a lot of boxes to check, and it's a very time consuming process. There's no shortcuts. You have to go through it. You have to do it the right way. We firmly believe in making sure that we've checked every box, dotted every I, crossed every T. So as of
Yeah.
July of this year, we're at 91% complete of all those tasks. And we're going to be continuously, moving toward 100% towards the end of the year, which is
Got
when
it.
we plan to launch.
Are these trucks primarily driving on highways, or are they also, you've got this generalizable system? Do they also need to be get off the highway and, kind of go into the depot and do what's it called? A post and a hitch? Is that what it's called when they park it?
Yeah. So yes, the answer is all of the above. So
Okay.
it's not just a highway product.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you have to get on the highway and you have to get off the highway, right?
Yeah.
That's a kind of a minimum requirement for the service. For a long time, the industry was focused on what we call the hub and spoke model, meaning you find two hubs on the side of the highway that are, very closely positioned,
Hmm.
but it became clear that that doesn't really scale, and it's not really what customers want. And
Got it.
so The technology also improved much more quickly than we expected in the early days, especially with modern AI kind of end-to-end approaches that we implement. And so we're able to handle surface street conditions. We're able to drive off the highway. We're able to drive into the depots, into the service centers, into the areas where our customers want us to be. Even retail delivery, right? So we go to retail stores and drive all the way up to the dock, and so that allows the system to be as flexible as it needs to be on a per customer basis. Ultimately,
Yeah.
we think that's what customers are going to want.
And I mean, I guess from a highway versus streets perspective, is one more challenging the other? I mean, I guess like from a layman's point of view, it seems like highways are more straightforward, but the stakes are obviously much higher because you have high speed and high weight. And cities, there's a lot more people and things and crazy drivers going on, but obviously you're going at much lower speeds. I guess same weight though.
Yeah, I think it's trade-off. There's challenges in both that are different, as you point out, right? Higher speeds on the highway, but more controlled traffic. That
Hmm.
doesn't mean that something crazy can't happen.
Right.
Crazy things often do happen. And so you have to be prepared for the worst case scenario. And so it's hard now. I've swung my pendulum back and forth between, oh, surface streets are harder, oh, highway is harder. And I think there's not really one answer to that question.
Yeah.
It really just depends on where are you trying to operate under
Mhm.
which conditions. So for instance, if you want to operate day and night, rain or shine, in all kinds of weather conditions, it's harder than if it's just perfectly sunny, perfectly clear, easy day,
Yeah.
right? So all the conditions will factor into how complicated the safety case is. And also, a lot of urban driving or surface street driving is different in itself.
Yeah.
And every major city driving conditions are different. So some are going to be harder, some are going to be easier. I don't think it's really it's hard to give a definitive answer to that.
Yeah.
I would say by and large, self-driving is a very hard problem to solve, as many have tried, and it's taken the industry multiple decades to get to where we are today. The good news, though, is that I think we are very much over the hump. This is now a commercialization problem, and we are all collectively going to be scaling to
Yeah.
something that is going to be pretty significant. It's going to have a pretty significant impact on society in the coming decade.
Yeah, you mentioned the goal on the safety side being safer than a human driver, which, I think mathematically as an engineer, I'm a former aerospace engineer. I retired about 12 years ago, but, I think it makes a lot of sense, right? If it's mathematically safer. I think I don't know if that I've heard that much though on the robotaxi side. I wonder if because it's more of a consumer facing product, you have people in the car that you're transporting around. How do you think about that kind of safety and I guess really the subjective nature of safety at times too, right? If there's a bad accident and someone looks at it and says, "Oh, a human wouldn't have done that." Do you think there's any brand risk for you, or is it different in the trucking space versus robotaxi?
I think transparency is so important here,
Hmm.
right? If you are transparent about the analysis that you do
Yeah.
and the safety case that you ultimately provide, and there's no standard, right? There's no government standard that says this is what a safety case consists of. This is what the criteria is, and this is what you have to show. And
Hmm.
so it's up to every company to come up with their own confidence bar on what is sufficient from a safety case perspective. And yeah, inherently, there's going to be risk when you put this technology out on the road. Inevitably, something will go wrong. I think Waymo has really proven that things go
Yeah.
wrong all the time, right? Waymos get into accidents all the time, some of which are not at fault, some of which are at fault, right? I think it's been really instructive to see from afar
Hmm.
how that has played out, both from a
Yeah.
regulatory perspective, from a public sentiment perspective, and from a company handling perspective. They sort of pioneered the space. They are the most advanced with the most vehicles deployed out of any autonomy company. And so we can kind of look to that deployment as an example of
Yeah.
what do we think is going to happen? What ducks do we have to have in a row? How do we handle it when it ultimately happens? The nice thing about a full level 4 self-driving system is that we have all the data. When
Hmm.
inevitably something happens, we can reconstruct the scene,
Hmm.
to the millisecond, and you know what all the accelerations and velocities are,
Yeah.
who was doing what, exactly what the sequence of events were. It takes a little bit of the ambiguity and emotion out of what a normal human to human interaction would be of like, I saw this, she
Yeah.
saw that, he saw that, he said that. right? We can take all of that out of the equation and we can kind of get down to the actual facts about what happened. And I think that really helps from a
Yeah.
liability and risk perspective. At the end of the day, though, these systems have to, by and large, be very safe and productive. People
Hmm.
have to be excited about them. They have to be useful. They have to be perceived as safe. Otherwise, there's going to be pushback from a public sentiment and ultimately
Yeah.
regulatory perspective. So I think the burden is on companies like Kodiak to really be ultra responsible, like extra conservative,
Yeah.
especially in the beginning as we introduce new technology to the motoring public and build that confidence together over time that these systems are actually pretty benign. And in
Hmm.
particular for trucking, the trucks, they get into the right hand lane, they go the speed limit, and
Yeah.
they mind their own business. It's like perfect. You just pass them by because you're going much faster on the left side and you don't think anything of it. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what we want people to experience.
So I know you're an optimist, but have you thought in your mind, okay, you mentioned looking at Waymo and obviously they're the leader and, not everything, developing any new groundbreaking technology, obviously can be bumps and bruises along the way. Is there anything you've seen that, okay, if something does go wrong with our technology or maybe when something does go wrong, here's how I'm going to handle it. Here's what I'm going to do differently. Here's what I've learned. Because I do think there is a good kind of second mover advantage right now, having seen a few examples of companies not doing the right way, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I definitely want to learn from the mistakes of the past. Life is a continuously learning experience, right? You have
Hmm.
to be a student of history. You have to look at the good. You have to look at the bad. You have to learn from what others have done. And I'm not going to name names or talk about specific incidents,
Sure.
but certainly the lessons we've learned are transparency is king, right?
Yeah.
You want to be transparent, and you have to have the confidence to do so, of
Yeah.
course. Like you have to have done the prep work in your safety case to be able to say, okay, this thing happened, we expected this to happen, this fit within the distribution of the data that we have, we
Hmm.
performed this way, we expected our system to do X, Y, and Z, and look, it did X, Y, and Z, and maybe it got unlucky this time, or maybe
Yeah.
the other actor did something out of our control. you know these systems are really intended to be superhuman, but they're not perfect. And they likely
Yeah.
won't be perfect for a very long time, especially in mixed traffic where you have both
Hmm.
human actors and autonomous actors. And so we just have to be able to rely on the safety documentation that we produced before the incident, and then ultimately be transparent about what happened and be honest about whether there was a true flaw in the system that needs to be repaired. The great thing, though, is that it will only get better,
Hmm.
right? The technology only improves. I think it's not controversial to say that we as a society are no longer getting better at driving. If anything, we're getting worse at
Yeah,
driving,
I
right?
think
So
actually
humans are
the
on the
data's in. We
decline.
are getting
Yeah.
worse.
So humans are on the decline,
Yeah.
and robots are on the incline, and
Yeah.
so they're going to pull away over time, and we're going to go through this weaning period in the
Hmm.
very early stages of the deployment, but I think we'll quickly pass that and people will very quickly come to accept that these are the safest vehicles on the road.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think it's not a high bar when you sometimes look around when you're driving and see everyone on their phones and tired and not paying attention. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think on a lighter note, I did see that you were in New York recently, and you got to ring the opening bell on the New York Stock Exchange, which I think is pretty cool. And kind of also reminded me, I've known this for a while, but you guys are a public company in an industry where most other trucking and robotaxi players are all private. What's that been like?
Yeah, so just a quick clarification, it was the NASDAQ opening bell.
Oh,
So I don't,
sorry.
I don't want to upset anybody by mixing the two, but it was a great experience. We were super privileged to be asked to come back. It's been nearly a year now since we've gone public. That's been an exciting journey. It's been a challenging journey. You'll always hear
Hmm.
people give you advice like, "Oh, going public is it's such a hard thing to do. There's all this additional scrutiny. There's all these additional filings and rules and things that you have to worry about." All of that's absolutely true. At the same time, for me, having been in this space for so long, I really feel like it's a new adventure. It's
Hmm.
something that is different than
Yeah.
what I had been doing for so long. And so, as someone who likes to learn and continuously improve, it's been a really exciting year for me. It's certainly been an instructional year, and it really forces you to think about your business. You
Hmm.
can't fake it anymore. You have to be real. You have to be honest. There are regulations in place that force honesty, and they force you to be very rigorous in the way that you operate your business. As a company that is still kind of finding our legs in a deployment and our revenues are still relatively low, it's more challenging than it is to be private for sure. But I think it's been overall a very rewarding experience for me, and I think ultimately it's the right decision and the right path for the company.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess for a company like yours that is, like you said, early in the revenue journey, I guess what are the milestones or the KPIs that you're presenting to investors? I think in your last update, you talked about 40,000 cumulative hours of paid driverless operations, I think, which was an 71% increase. You also mentioned that safety score, 91%. I got one for you. I don't know if you track this, but I like the gross weight that you've transported autonomously too. I think that might be an interesting metric. But yeah, what are you kind of tracking internally, and also what do investors kind of care about?
Yeah, it's those factors. I think the number one indicator of the utility of a driverless system is that hours of driverless operations. So paid hours of driverless operations, paid because you want to distinguish testing from deployment, and you also want to distinguish from driving around the block versus carrying passengers, right? Like in the robotaxi wording, right? You can do driverless operations, which is great, but if you're not actually getting paid for it, what value are you providing to an end customer? And so we kind of thought about it, and we're like, all right, out people are always paid by their time. If you're replacing a driver of some kind, then ultimately, no matter what industry you're in, whether that's long haul trucking or industrial trucking or robotaxis, everybody gets paid for their time. And so it's really the hours that the system is running
Yeah.
is what the consumer or the customer, whether that's a consumer or a commercial operator, that's what they're ultimately paying for. So we think hours is the right way to think about it in terms of the utility of the system that is being that is providing value to a customer. And yeah, we crossed 40,000 hours of operation. It
Yeah.
also doesn't allow you to obscure your performance metrics in a high level number of agents or
Mhm.
vehicles, right? If I said I had 10 trucks, but I ran them one time per week,
Yeah.
and I didn't tell you that. I just said we had 10 trucks, and somebody else says, well, we have 20 trucks, or somebody has 100 trucks. It's like 100 trucks running 24/7 is significantly different than 100 trucks sitting in a garage where they run once a day or once a week.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where hours of operation cuts right through that. It's like you can have as many trucks or as few
Yeah.
trucks as you want. If they're operating and being paid for the hours they operate, then that's a really good indicator for investors of, is somebody actually extracting value from the service that you're offering? So that's the
Yeah.
one that we really focus on. That's the one that we'll continue to push on. Obviously, in terms of milestones, getting driverless highway
Mhm.
operational is a huge one for the company. Again, that's what we're focused on. We plan to pull the driver by the end of the year, and then it's going to be scaling revenue through 2027 and beyond. So we're really at the inflection point. It's an exciting time in the industry.
Yeah, no, I think I like that metric because there's a lot of argument over vehicles and whether there's a safety driver or not. But yeah, like paid driverless miles, hours. I think those hard metrics are definitely interesting. And like you said, as a public company, you kind of need to provide a lot of that information. Do you feel like you're in the lead? I mean, there's a lot of competition in trucking and other areas of autonomous vehicles. What do you think about the competition, or do you not think about them at all?
Yeah, I mean, we try to focus on ourselves for
Mhm.
the most part. Like, I think we have the largest driverless truck fleet deployed anywhere in the world today. And so, if depending on how you look at it, we certainly think that's a leading position. We're really proud
Yeah.
of the reliability that we've been able to offer. Again, these are this is really the first of its kind where those trucks are owned by the customer. So
Mhm.
think about the difference in service level or the difference in reliability. For me, if I sold you a product, you
Yeah.
expect it to just work. When you buy something from the store, you take it home and you're like, this is just going to work.
Right.
I open it from the package and it's going to work. Right. But if I operate my own fleet, I can sweep a lot of things under the rug. And so you don't really have, because your operations personnel are experts.
Yeah.
They're trained experts. They've been doing it for a very, very long time. They know exactly what to do. They know that one little trick to get everything started.
Hmm.
But for us, our fleet is owned and operated by Atlas. Their operators are the ones that are interacting with the truck on a daily basis, and it has to effectively be seamless. So we think that's a much higher bar than just operating your own fleet. And so from that perspective, we
Definitely.
we definitely think that we're at least one of the leaders in the industry.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think the reason why I ask is I feel like sometimes, I'm curious if you see the other AV trucking companies, maybe not even as competitors or frenemies or more collaborative, in kind of the sense that a rising tide lifts all boats, right? If investors are, excited about multiple companies in an industry, do you think there's some kind of tailwinds that you get from that? I'm curious how you think about, your piece in the industry. There's been talk in the past, oh, if there's one bad AV incident, it's kind of bad for the industry. I'm just curious how you think about that, if you have any opinion.
I think from the incident perspective, we're less worried about that these days. It used to
Hmm.
be a bigger concern. It's important for us to be transparent about how we carry ourselves and what
Yeah.
are our safety protocols. We work with regulators at every level, from the municipal level to the state level to the federal level, so that they know exactly what we're doing and how we're doing it. Therefore, if there's something else that happens from some other company, they don't necessarily compare us apples to apples, right?
Yeah.
We do it our way. We do it a way that we're very confident in, and so we shouldn't be measured against somebody else's bar where there's no standard, right? They can effectively do whatever they want, and that has happened many, many times. And I think there's
Hmm.
there's a lot of precedent for the fact that the industry is no longer broadly punished for the actions of one specific company. At the same time, you mentioned the rising tide raising all of the boats. I do definitely agree that this is still a tiny industry,
Hmm.
right? We are still in the infancy. We're in the top of the first inning when it comes to deployment of self-driving vehicles. And so the progress broadly, for instance, from Waymo, as an example, as we talked about earlier, has definitely been a positive
Yeah.
for Kodiak and the trucking industry, in addition to other robotaxi companies. So I do think that there's this sense of just broad awareness that the technology is real.
Hmm.
And then, of course, you have to show up and convince everyone that you are part of that real story. And there,
Yeah.
there is definitely an aspect to that that's really important. I don't believe this is a winner take all space. I think that the trucking industry will have multiple providers of autonomous technology. And so we're just really focused on ourselves and focused on deploying our system as safely and as quickly as we can.
Yeah. All right. Last question before I let you go here. You said something earlier that caught my attention, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think it was something to the effect that long haul trucking will be bigger than the robotaxi industry. I guess right now Waymo's valued, private valuation over $100 billion, and I think they're kind of the leaders in kind of the autonomous vehicle space. Tell me what you see long term. Do you think trucking, long haul trucking, will be bigger, from a TAM or revenue perspective than robotaxi? How do you think about the two down the road?
Yeah, I think from a TAM perspective, it's certainly larger, like at
Hmm.
least as it exists today, right? It's
Yeah.
a nearly $1 trillion TAM in the US, $4 trillion TAM and opportunity
And this
globally.
would be just goods that are shipped around
Yeah, this is like
long haul
total
trucking
volume,
and
total
yeah,
total revenue of
what people
goods
are
that are being
paying
being
to.
shipped around. Exactly. It's what people are paid to move and transport goods
Hmm.
broadly. And so, when you're going after such a large opportunity, we think there's a lot of value there. I think robo taxis are really interesting, but they're more of a nice to have as opposed to a need.
Yeah.
In the commercial transportation space, there's a real need for this technology. There are challenges that these customers are facing, and they have been facing for decades. And so we want to serve customers that have a real need. We like to say that we're attacking, we're going after the dull, the dirty, and the dangerous, right? If it's
Hmm.
dull, dirty, or dangerous, people either shouldn't be doing it or they don't want to be doing it. And that's really where our technology comes into play. Robotaxis are great, but there's other modes of transportation that people can take. I think there's no other solution in the commercial market to the scaling and growth needs of the industry. And trucking is the backbone of a modern economy, not just the US economy, but all economies around the world. And so we play a critical role in, I think, the future growth of the economy. And that's why I'm so excited about the commercial market.
Awesome. I think that's a great note to end on. So, Don, really appreciate you spending a bunch of time with me, giving me the deep dive into all things Kodiak. And the opportunity is massive in the trucking and industrial and defense space. So, we'll be following your journey closely. Thanks, Don.
Thanks for having me.